Hi everyone, in today's video I'm going to show you how to paint this watercolor rose. Roses are one of the birth month flowers for the month of June, and I cannot wait to show you how I painted this piece. For this project we are starting with a piece of watercolor paper. This is Arches 140 pound cold press watercolor paper. I'm also using my limited palette with sap green, indigo, cerulean, magenta, and cad yellow. I will also be using my round brushes. I won't be using my size 10, I kind of moved it over. This is a size 4 Princeton round brush. We're going to start by mixing our cad yellow with our magenta until we get a warm magenta. So we're not really looking for an orange. We're wanting it to be more on the pink side, but adding cad yellow really warms up the magenta so it's not quite so neon in feel. And then once we get the right color, I'm going to add a bunch of water so that we have a light enough wash to start. I'm using my size 4 round brush again, and it is the perfect size to create these C curves in our petals that we're going to be doing for the rose. I start with a few tight lines to represent the center of the rose, and then as I get farther out, I'm pushing down farther on my brush, creating more of this moon shape or a C curve, and I'm trying to interweave them together, overlap them so that they're not exactly the same. And you can see after I do the center, I start building up one side. I'm focusing on this one side because I want my flower to kind of be pointing off to the left. And if I do too much on the opposite side, it's going to look odd, like it's open but it's tilted. So something that I do is I focus on the center. I build mostly on one side because I can make the petals fuller by pushing down more, wiggling my brush around to get the jagged edge. And then once I have that where I want it, then I can add the smaller petals on the other side to represent the other side of the flower. So that's how I get the right proportions. And then as you come farther down from the flower, as you're creating these petals that are closer to the bottom, we're going to make them bigger. We can add more water, and we're tucking them into each other at the ends and then keeping the center really wide, and we can make it wiggly. It's kind of like an English garden flower that doesn't have those perfect edges. They're a little bit wrinkly, and I love that look. So now that I have the right proportion and the shape that I want as it's pointing up to the left, but it's got that full look of the petals down at the bottom, I added a few very light petals in really thin lines over at the top to give the impression of the petals that are behind that we can't really see. Now I added some more magenta into our cad yellow magenta mixture, and I'm adding this color very lightly where the petals are tucking into the flower. So remember that the curved, that big wide part of our C curve is going to be very light because it's catching the light, but everything that's tucked down into the flower as the petals are going down to attach to the stem is going to have a little bit of shadow. So we can put some of that color there, let it dry for now, and we'll move on to the greenery. Roses tend to have deep greenery, so we don't necessarily need to start with a very light yellowy bright color in the beginning. So this is a sap green indigo mixture. I did add a lot of water, so it is on the lighter side of the wash, but the colors and the hues are all very deep. A nice thin stem for the rose. You can make a few little angles on the edge to look like thorns, and then we're going to create a stem going up to the top where there's going to be a rosebud. Now I love painting rose leaves because they're so jaggedy and wild. You don't really have to think too much about them. I start with just the lightest pressure to create the stem, and then I use the full body of my brush to wiggle each side of the leaf, leaving a tiny bit of white space of the paper for the veining, and then I can kind of clean it up to make it a little bit sharper and more of an exact line. And then while it's still wet, you can make the edges more pointy or wiggly or however you want to kind of mess around with them. Now, one of my favorite tips when I'm painting roses, especially like an English garden variety, is adding magenta into your greens. So I mixed my magenta into the green on my palette, and then I am tapping that color into my greenery while it is still wet to get this beautiful, deep, reddish green color that looks so natural. Now I mixed more of my sap green indigo combo because we're going to start doing some of the greenery up here by the rose bud. I felt like I needed 3 leaves to balance this painting out, so I did a tinier leaf as we get up to the top here. Now I'm starting by using the tip of my brush at the top of this greenery and then pushing down with the full body of my brush to come down to the base where it's attached to the stem, keeping these little sepals very thin and light. And we're going to let that dry after we add some magenta, of course. We're going to let that dry and then add the flower bud. And then with more of that magenta on my brush, I'm going around and adding just a few more details. I love a crisp reddish green edge on the leaf. I think that is so, so pretty. Now we're going to take some of our cad yellow and our magenta again to build up some of the shadowy colors in our rose. Now that it has dried, we're going to get more of a harsh line. So if it's ever too intense of color or the line is too harsh, we add the color and then we rinse our brush, tap it on a paper towel, and with a damp brush, we can blend that out. So really, we need to focus on where the light areas of the tips of our petals are, and then maintain those areas. So I like to think that really I'm painting the shadows around the tips of the petals, and that helps me to see it a lot better. We're negatively painting where we want our highlights to be. Also remember that the center of the rose is a lot more tight and folded in and shadowed, and so we can use some of our darker magenta in that area. And then as everything is starting to dry, I can add deeper shadows, more color. I'm trying to find the balance of adding color, but not too much color so that it still looks like a light pinkish orange rose. But the most important thing is to maintain the highlighted tip of the petals. So I like to try to have a very nice, subtle blend of some of those medium values, and then I pick up more magenta and very lightly and precisely add some of those deeper values in very exact places, minimal. Keep it light. And then if it's too much, again, we can just use water and blend it out, going around those highlighted tips of the flower, and also remembering that this looks really great. We don't have to fiddle with it too much. We don't have to make the shadows too dark. On a light pink flower, this is dark enough. So we're going to move on. Using that pinkish orange color that we have, we're going to add some pink shapes inside our greenery that we've created for our flower bud, tapping in some deeper magenta colors toward the base, maybe a little bit toward the tip, removing some of the paint if we need to, if it starts to flow too much. Then I was thinking something's missing. Oh, it's the sepals underneath the main rose. So I added those really quick with, of course, a little punch of that magenta to finish it off. And that is our final rose. So I'm doing this as part of a series. So I'm writing Rose and June, but this is a great flower to paint any time of the year. I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you all next time. Bye.